What is going on, guys? So a few days ago when I was recording my most recent video that is up on my channel, the Zoro bounty hunting video, which ended up not really being about Zoro, which is also kind of weird since all the comments are about Zoro. Really weird, you kind of just have to watch the video and read the comments to know what I'm talking about. But I was about 2.5 minutes into making the video, and for whatever reason, something dawned on me. And I wanted to stop making that video right there and make the one that I'm making right here, right now. But I decided to just go with it and save it for today. So basically, I'm going to be talking about the age-long debate about the difference in power levels between Luffy and Zoro. For the most part, I mean, almost 100% of people can agree that Zoro is certainly stronger than Sanji, and that Luffy is stronger than Zoro, and I, of course, can agree with these ideas. However, the big two different categories you could be placed into once you are already in there is whether you think that the difference between Luffy and Zoro is pretty significant, or if they're basically exactly the same, with Luffy just having the slightest difference and the slightest advantage over Zoro in terms of power levels, and I happen to fall into that latter category. My opinion on that has never really had any hard facts or anything, has mainly been just based on my way of interpreting the story, but for whatever reason when I was making my last video, I just had a few things kind of click, and I was like, you know what? I think it's actually kind of unreasonable to think that there is a large gap between Luffy and Zoro. And maybe even at this very moment, at the current point in the story, like in Wano, right after Whole Cake Island, maybe there is a little bit of a gap here. But I think that generally speaking, for like 99% of the time in the story, the difference between them is so small that it's basically not even there. So just keep in mind that while I am giving my explanation as to why I do fit into that second category, if there is any time in this series that this isn't true, right? If there's any time that there is actually a kind of significant gap between the two of them, it is going to be right now, so I am going to exclude that exact time. And for all we know, Zoro might be training right now too, so maybe he actually has caught up or something. I don't know. Just ignore that. Let's just get into this. So basically, my idea just rides on a few assumptions that I think are kind of unreasonable not to agree with at this point in the story. And then if you can agree with them, it's kind of just like, all right, well, I guess with that all being true, Zoro has to be right there with Luffy. And the first assumption is this. It is pretty much that, I guess, Mihawk is Yonko level in some way, shape, or form. He's above Admiral level per se, and he is probably at the Yonko level. I think this is going to be the most difficult assumption for people to agree with me on here, although I think it is, again, a little unreasonable not to think so. Remember, I have my Mihawk versus Shanks video, and I have said a million times that I think that in a battle between the two of them, it could certainly go either way, but it has basically been extremely strongly implied that Mihawk is capable of defeating Shanks. Like, it's basically a 50-50 battle. They've had many duels, and both of them have won these duels. So he is definitely going to be at Shanks' level. Now, a lot of people have said, well, Shanks has probably gotten stronger since that time. Okay, for one thing, that makes no sense because he's lost one of his arms, and I know that doesn't affect anything, but why are we assuming that Shanks has gotten so much stronger and not Mihawk? That's just, it's kind of absurd to me. I think that that's not very logical at all. So it's very reasonable, in my opinion, to say that Mihawk is probably Yonko level. And now, with that being said, a lot of people, I would say maybe a little bit over 50% of the fan base, at least as far as what I see in my comments and other people's comments and whatnot, most people seem to think that Shanks is currently the strongest living character in the series. I personally think that he's probably at third behind Kaido and then Dragon, or Dragon and Kaido. It's really hard to say between those two. But I could even see Shanks being the strongest. That's not really the point right now. The point is he is all the way up there, which means Mihawk basically has to be all the way up there. He's at the Yonko level. That's how powerful we're talking here. So, okay, that is the first assumption that needs to be made. On to the second one. I think, again, this is pretty reasonable to assume that when Luffy does probably become the most powerful living character in the series. He's not going to be so much more powerful than everyone else that it's like not even a high diff battle, it's just like mid diff. I think that basically when he does get to his Pirate King level, if he's fighting another Yonko, it's going to be an extreme diff battle. It's going to be like Aokiji versus Akainu. It's not going to be a blowout in any way, shape, or form. I mean, seriously, are we really going to think that Luffy's going to get to the point where he's going to blow out Kaido? No. And I guess even more important person to talk about, Shanks. Is going to get to the point where he can blow out Shanks? I highly doubt that. So, okay, again, that's number 2. I think that is more than out of the way. I think it's very agreeable. And lastly, the third one in this one, I think we're watching a different series if you don't agree with me here. The final assumption that I have made is that Zoro is going to surpass Mihawk by the end of this series. If you don't agree with that, I don't know. I mean, there's probably nothing I can say to convince you because that's so far out there that what can I really do? Am I right? So, with those 3 being made, at that point, it only really makes sense that Zoro has to be extremely close to Luffy in overall power levels, at least generally in the story, unless he's going to make some kind of huge comeback and he's been behind the entire series for no reason. Because if he is going to surpass Mihawk and Luffy is going to get to pretty much the top Yonko level and Mihawk is Yonko level, then Luffy and Zoro would both end up being Yonko level. The only way that would still not put them extremely close to each other, I suppose, is if the second assumption couldn't be agreed upon, which would be Luffy is so much stronger than other people at Yonko level that he could like mid-diff them, which again I think is completely unreasonable. So that's pretty much it, right? I mean, doesn't it kind of all make sense that they have to be extremely close to each other? If that's not agreeable, then like I said, pretty much Zoro has to be very behind for the entire series, and just out of nowhere, for no reason, he's going to massively catch up. And you would think if that is going to happen, that would happen in Wano. However, that would be even more ridiculous considering the arc immediately before Wano, Luffy made like one of the biggest increases in power he has in the entire series. So for him to just take this massive step ahead just for Zoro to already be very behind and then just get even more extremely ridiculously behind, I mean, what's going to go on in Wano? Is Zoro going to turn into some kind of god or something? Like, what are we even talking about here? I also think from a storytelling perspective, it's not like it ever particularly made sense for them to have this huge power gap. I'm not saying it made no sense. I'm not saying that mine made particularly more. I just think that there was no real evidence for either one of them, so you could be in either side. But then when I break it down this way, it kind of makes a lot more sense to lean towards my category. I mean, even earlier in the story, there was a line dropped, how could this guy not be the captain if he's this powerful? Well, basically, Zoro is an exception to that rule. He is basically as powerful as the captain, so it makes a lot of sense how you could get a little confused there. On top of him eventually going to become the greatest swordsman in the world, which should be a pretty powerful character considering swords are basically the most vanilla way of fighting, I guess. I mean, there's devil fruits, but those aren't supposed to be common. So once you get past that, it's got to be either guns and swords. And if you're the best at one of those, I'm thinking you're going to be pretty goddamn powerful. On top of that, there is a lot of connections and similarities between Rayleigh and Zoro. They, of course, are the second in command of the crew that was the greatest crew of all time and will become the greatest crew of all time, respectively. So, with that being said, I mean, we've already seen that Rayleigh is Admiral level when he's very old, and in my opinion, he would have won that battle if it was actually drawn out to the death, so. And if we are talking about Rayleigh, I don't think it's going to be too much of a difference, but since I do think that Luffy is going to end up becoming stronger than Roger was, I think that Zoro would follow suit on this and become a little bit stronger than Rayleigh was. And again, we saw Rayleigh taking on Kizaru in what seemed to me a battle he probably would have won under extreme difficulty if it was taken to the death, but that was when he was far out of his prime. If he was in his prime, I can't even imagine what we'd be seeing. And then again, we still have to consider, I think Zoro would be even a little bit more powerful than Rayleigh in his prime. So That's that's pretty intense. I mean, come on. So that pretty much wraps up all I wanted to say about this topic. I have mentioned it in a lot of different videos where I was talking about just the Straw Hats and the Monster Trio's levels of power. I've always said how I think that Luffy and Zoro are extremely close. Like maybe if Luffy is 100, Zoro is 99, maybe even a 99.5 or something. I do think it only makes sense for Luffy to be the strongest in the crew, but I don't think it's really a big gap. I think that if the two of them were to fight, and I've said this a million times, it would be like an Akainu versus Aokiji situation, a 10-day long battle that was so ridiculous it completely destroyed an island they were on. I know it didn't destroy it, but I mean it changed the climates quite significantly. So I think you know what I mean. If you enjoyed this video, remember to give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already. Remember to leave me a comment letting me know what you thought about this video, if you enjoyed it, if you enjoyed this new format I'm doing. Well, I shouldn't really call it new, but I kind of got away from it for a while, and now I'm coming back to it, and people seem to be liking it, so I've just been doing it. Let me know if you agree with that sentiment. If you have not already, just like I mentioned in my last video, remember to check the description and click on the link to my Discord. Make sure to come check it out in there. We have tons of One Piece discussion, different versus battles between characters. There's a whole section dedicated to that. You can just start a topic, anything you want, this character versus this character, who do you think would win? I guarantee you'll get a lot of people talking about it. You could start a whole conversation in a matter of seconds because that is by far the most popular channel on my Discord, so make sure to check that out. There's also different animes and mangas that are talked about. There's like a million different channels on my Discord that I'm sure you could find something you'll be interested, so make sure to check that out. I hope you guys have an excellent rest of your day, and I will talk to you soon.